At the opening of the 18th century, Edinburgh rises from its volcanic spine like a dark crown against the Scottish sky. The castle, ancient and watchful, dominates the skyline, its stone walls carrying the memory of sieges, kings, and bloodshed. Below it, the old town spills eastward along the Royal Mile, a dense ribbon of closes, wynds, and towering tenements packed tightly together, as if the city itself is bracing against the cold winds that sweep in from the Firth of Forth. Smoke hangs perpetually in the air, a mixture of peat fires, brewing ale, and human presence, lending the city a smell both earthy and acrid. This is Edinburgh at a turning point. Scotland has entered the 18th century burdened by recent failure and quiet uncertainty. The disastrous Darien scheme at the end of the 1600s, an ambitious attempt to establish a Scottish colony in Panama, has drained the nation's treasury and shaken its confidence. Families have lost sons, merchants have lost fortunes, and the political elite have lost illusions of Scotland's independent economic strength. These losses linger in tavern conversations and council chambers alike, shaping the mood of a city searching for stability. The Act of Union in 1707 binds Scotland and England into a single kingdom, a political marriage that is still raw and deeply contested. In Edinburgh, reaction is mixed and often bitter. Some see opportunity, access to English markets, imperial trade, and economic recovery. Others see betrayal, the selling of Scotland's sovereignty by its own parliament. Crowds gather in the streets to protest. Pamphlets circulate accusing politicians of treachery. Yet even as resentment simmers, the machinery of daily life continues, indifferent to ideology. Geography defines Edinburgh's character. Hemmed in by hills and lochs, the city grows upward rather than outward. Tall tenement buildings house merchants, craftsmen, laborers, and the poor in vertical layers of society. Wealthier residents occupy higher floors, away from street filth but exposed to harsh winds, while the poorest live closer to the ground, navigating mud, refuse, and the constant risk of disease. There is no modern sanitation. Waste is dumped from windows into the streets below, often accompanied by shouted warnings. Rain washes filth downhill toward the Nor Loch, a stagnant body of water at the foot of the old town that serves as both dumping ground and grim symbol of urban neglect. Yet Edinburgh is not merely a city of squalor. It is also a place of learning, ambition, and intellectual fire. The University of Edinburgh draws students from across Scotland and beyond, offering education in medicine, law, philosophy, and theology. Classrooms echo with Latin debates, while nearby coffeehouses buzz with conversation that stretches late into the night. Ideas matter here. Words carry weight. Religion remains a central force in shaping daily life. The Church of Scotland exerts moral authority over the population, its ministers preaching discipline, humility, and obedience. Kirk sessions monitor behavior closely, calling parishioners to account for sins both public and private. Sabbath observance is strict. The city quiets on Sundays under the watchful eye of faith. Yet beneath this rigid moral framework, tensions grow between tradition and change, faith and reason. Economically, Edinburgh balances precariously. Trade flows through nearby ports like Leith, bringing goods from Europe and increasingly the wider empire. Tobacco, wine, textiles, and books circulate through warehouses and shops, enriching a merchant class eager to claim its place among Europe's commercial cities. Craftsmen, tailors, shoemakers, printers, and metalworkers labor in small workshops, their livelihoods tied to both local demand and distant markets. Politically, power has shifted. Edinburgh is no longer the seat of an independent Scottish parliament, and the loss is felt keenly. Government buildings remain, but their purpose has changed. Authority now flows south to London, leaving local leaders to navigate a new reality where influence must be negotiated rather than assumed. This transition breeds frustration, but also adaptability, forcing Edinburgh's elites to reimagine their role within a larger British state. As dawn breaks over the city, church bells toll and the streets begin to stir. Vendors set up stalls, apprentices sweep shop fronts, and scholars hurry toward lectures. Life continues amid uncertainty, shaped by forces larger than any one citizen. Edinburgh stands at first light, rooted in its medieval past, yet unknowingly poised on the threshold of transformation. As the century advances, Edinburgh's social fabric reveals itself in layers as dense and complex as its architecture. Power is unevenly distributed, but its effects reach every household, from the candlelit chambers of the elite to the damp, crowded rooms of the poor. Class is not merely a concept here. It is a daily experience, felt in clothing, speech, and opportunity. The city's ruling class consists of landed gentry, lawyers, merchants, and church leaders, many of whom reside in tall townhouses along the Royal Mile or in quieter streets branching away from its bustle. These individuals dominate civic life, serving on councils, courts, and kirk sessions. Their education sets them apart. Many are trained in rhetoric and law, skilled in argument and persuasion, and keenly aware of Edinburgh's reputation as a center of learning. Below them, a growing middle class of shopkeepers, skilled artisans, and traders navigates a world of modest comfort and constant risk. Success depends on reputation and connection. Credit is personal, trust is essential, and a single misstep can ruin a family's standing. These households value education and discipline, hopping to climb socially in a city where advancement is difficult but not impossible. For the laboring poor, life is far harsher. Servants, porters, washerwomen, and unskilled workers crowd into shared rooms, often taking in lodgers to afford rent. Disease spreads easily in these conditions. Smallpox, typhus, and tuberculosis stalk the closes, indifferent to moral sermons or social rank. Charity exists, but it is limited and often conditional, administered through the church with an emphasis on moral worthiness. Religion continues to shape public and private life, but its authority faces subtle challenges. Ministers still preach to packed kirks, yet the rise of rational inquiry begins to shift how people understand the world. Intellectual debates spill out of lecture halls into taverns and homes. Philosophers question long-held assumptions about governance, human nature, and divine authority, even as they remain outwardly respectful of religious tradition. The Jacobite uprisings cast a long shadow over the city. Loyalty to the exiled Stuart dynasty persists in parts of Scotland, and Edinburgh becomes a strategic and symbolic prize. In 1715 and again in 1745, the threat of rebellion brings fear and tension. When Jacobite forces briefly occupy the city during the 1745 Rising, daily routines are disrupted. Soldiers march through familiar streets, and citizens weigh silence against survival. Though the rebellion ultimately fails, its aftermath is profound, tightening government control and accelerating the decline of traditional Highland power structures. Trade and empire increasingly shape Edinburgh's fortunes. Scottish merchants invest in colonial enterprises, profiting from tobacco plantations in the Americas and trade routes stretching across the Atlantic. Wealth flows back into the city, funding libraries, societies, and elegant interiors. Yet this prosperity is uneven and built upon distant labor and suffering, realities rarely discussed openly in polite society. Despite conflict and inequality, Edinburgh hums with intellectual energy. This is the age that will later be called the Scottish Enlightenment, and its early currents are already visible. Thinkers gather to debate reason, progress, and the nature of society itself. Ideas circulate rapidly, carried by books, lectures, and conversation. Knowledge becomes a form of power, capable of reshaping institutions as effectively as armies or laws. Daily life unfolds against this backdrop of change. Markets fill with voices and color. Bells mark time. Arguments erupt and fade. The city lives in tension, between old loyalties and new identities, between faith and reason, between hardship and aspiration. Edinburgh is no longer merely enduring history, it is actively shaping it. By the latter half of the 18th century, Edinburgh reaches a defining moment. The pressures of overcrowding, disease, and fire in the old town have become impossible to ignore. At the same time, the city's intellectual and economic confidence has never been higher. From this collision of necessity and ambition emerges one of Edinburgh's most transformative projects, the creation of the new town. Planned with Enlightenment ideals of order, symmetry, and rational design, the new town represents a physical expression of new thinking. Wide streets, open squares, and elegant Georgian architecture stand in deliberate contrast to the cramped medieval streets of the old town. Construction begins in the 1760s, and with it comes a profound social shift. The city expands northward, draining the Norloch and reshaping the landscape itself. The new town becomes a symbol of progress and aspiration. Wealthier residents move into spacious homes filled with light and air, leaving behind the vertical congestion of the old city. This migration alters social geography, reinforcing class divisions even as it improves public health and urban life for some. Edinburgh now embodies two worlds at once, the ancient and the modern, standing side by side. Intellectually, the city stands at its peak. Philosophers, economists, and scientists produce ideas that ripple far beyond Scotland. Discussions of liberty, morality, and economic organization influence revolutions and reforms across the Atlantic world. Edinburgh earns a reputation as a hotbed of genius, its thinkers shaping the modern understanding of society itself. Yet progress carries consequences. Traditional ways of life erode under the weight of change. Rural populations are displaced by agricultural reform, swelling the city with newcomers seeking work. Industrialization, still in its early stages, introduces new rhythms of labor and new forms of inequality. The city grows wealthier, but also more complex and divided. Politically, Edinburgh has settled into its role within Britain. The memory of rebellion fades, replaced by pragmatic acceptance. Military presence ensures stability, while legal and educational institutions give the city influence disproportionate to its size. Power is no longer contested through open revolt, but through ideas, commerce, and reform. As the century draws toward its close, Edinburgh reflects upon itself. The city has survived loss, conflict, and uncertainty, emerging not diminished but transformed. Its streets tell stories of struggle and ambition, its buildings bearing witness to centuries of adaptation. The 18th century has reshaped Edinburgh's identity, turning a once insular capital into a beacon of thought and culture. The legacy of this era endures. Modern Edinburgh, its architecture, institutions, and intellectual traditions, owes much to the tensions and triumphs of the 1700s. From the shadow of the castle to the ordered elegance of the new town, the city stands as a testament to the power of ideas, resilience, and human ambition. In stone and thought alike, the Edinburgh of the 18th century continues to speak, reminding history that transformation often begins in uncertainty, and that from crowded streets and contested loyalties can rise a lasting legacy.